Welcome to the podcast, Wait, What Do You Do Again? Where we talk to everyday people doing amazing things. I'm your host, Megan DeFord. Let's go. Today, we're speaking with Danielle Reedy. Thank you so much for joining us. Danielle is not only a former Olympian, she's an author, a speaker, and a coach. Thank you for being here today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, you must be excited with the Olympics coming up. Can you talk about your pathway to the Olympics? I know that you have said that, or you've described yourself as an average girl who had this quantum leap to an Olympic athlete and the Olympic Games. Can you talk about that a little bit? What was your path?
Yeah, for sure. So my background is I'm actually born and raised in Vancouver, Canada, but my parents are Australian. So that will all make sense in a moment. But I got into the sport of synchronized swimming. If you're looking for it at the upcoming Olympic Games, it's actually, they call it artistic swimming now, kind of under the umbrella of artistic gymnastics and all of that. But I got into the sport of synchronized swimming when I was 8 years old. I am too tall to be a gymnast. I'm 5'9", and swimming is way too boring. You just go back and forth. And I wanted to do something a bit more expressive. So my mom found this crazy little sport. She chucked me in it. And after a few years, I really fell in love with it. It's a combination of, the athleticism and the endurance that it takes to be an athlete, as well with the teamwork. And I mean, I was a little girl. I get to wear a sparkly bathing suit and makeup. Like, I'm in. You got me, right? But throughout the years that I continued swimming, my only problem was that I just was never very talented. I was kind of like the girl that's like the great team player, but like not the most likely to. I was never the MVP. I was never the top athlete, but I was a great person to have around. Right. Good attitude, hard worker, right? And so I kind of knew that my path was never going anywhere. That's what I believed. And so when I was 18 years old and I graduated high school, I retired. There was nowhere else for me to go. And I stayed involved and I did my sport recreationally for a few years. And then after a few years had passed, I was actually going to university. I was working a couple jobs. And one day I was at a training session with my teammates. We were just kind of playing around and we were doing something in synchronized swimming, which we called highlights. Highlights is where we build a human pyramid underwater. We all egg beat her up to the surface, never touching the bottom. We create a human spring and somebody jumps, does a flip, and then lands in the water. It's pretty phenomenal to watch. Yeah. The only thing is that day, my teammate, and this happens often, this is the dangerous part of synchronized swimming, my teammate went up and she slipped and she fell on my head. In synchronized swimming, we do not have helmets. It's not like the NFL. We have no protection. So you can imagine a human being falling on your head. It's a bit of an impact. And it was just an innocent accident, to be honest. And so initially I felt fine. But when I was driving home that night, I started to feel really nauseous. I had a really bad headache and I had a midterm the next day. I was trying to study and I was trying to read the words in my textbook and I knew it was English, but I had no idea what it said. And the next day I went to the doctor and was diagnosed with a concussion. We really kind of say concussion is like, oh, they're fine. They just have a concussion. But I say it's very similar to struggling with your mental health, right? You look fine, but something's going on in your brain it's not working. It's not working to its optimal point. And the only way to recover from a concussion is literally to rest and lay in a dark room and not look at screens, and ended up having to drop out of the semester of university and kind of stop everything in my life. We all have moments in life where we kind of wonder why things are happening to us. And that was definitely one of those moments for me. But little did I know that there was kind of a huge universal plot twist that was about to happen. I was about to turn, when I had my concussion, I turned 21. It was not the 21st birthday I thought it would be. And the day after my 21st birthday, I was on the phone with a girlfriend of mine who was a previous teammate. And when we were on the phone, this was 2013, but Facebook was still around and thriving. She got the little ping on Facebook Messenger, and she got a message from the assistant national team coach of the Australian synchronized swimming team. It's quite a small sport in a small world. This coach knew her, and she also had Australian Canadian citizenship. And she said to her, and this girl was always a much better athlete than me. She said, "Any chance you want to come try out for the Australian team because we're trying to rebuild?" so we can get Australia to the 2016 Olympics. And as a friend, I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. You got to do this. I believe in you. You know, like, I think we always do this with our good girlfriends. We're like, yes, you've got this, right? And I was cheering her on. And then after about half an hour of excitement, she turns around, she looks at me and she's like, Danielle, you could do this as well. I kind of laughed. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, not only do I have a concussion, it's unspoken, but we all know that I was never the best athlete. Like, I'm in Canada, like, there's a million laundry lists reasons why I would never, that's just so impossible for me. And in that moment, I really, rattled with it. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. But at the same time, this is crazy. Like, this is a crazy opportunity, right? Like, and this is not going to happen again. This will not happen again. And I took a moment to kind of reflect. I've always been a bit of an old soul, reflect on, if I'm laying on my deathbed and one day and that day I look back on this moment in my life, which path would I rather that I have taken? Every single one of us has forks in the road in our life, the path where we can be brave or we can choose to be small. And I realized that I wanted to be brave. And I was terrified of what people are going to think of me. I was terrified of failing. I was terrified of everyone judging me, talking about behind my back. Who does she think that she is? But I was way more terrified of wondering who I could have been if I was brave enough.
That's amazing.
And that thought changed the trajectory of my life. And long story short, I ended up becoming an Olympian in 2016 with many ups and downs in between. But it was really that moment that everything changed for me.
How did you find that resilience and bravery? Is that something that was cultivated as a child, or where did that come from for you?
It's a really good question. I'm so grateful that I grew up in sport. I think there's a lot of kids that do nowadays, and whether you do a sport, at a high level or not, what we learn in a safe way. I'm such an advocate for sports, for people and for kids, because we're going to live in a world where we don't face as much adversity in the modern world, in the Western world, that we used to, right?
Yeah.
For the most part, we are safe. We don't have to fight for our food. We don't have to go out and hunt. Most of us aren't starving, but we need resilience in life to become strong people.
Yes.
And so we find that through sport. And that was in my journey of, I did all this pre the time of participation awards, right? Like, I was in the time where you lost. I was in the time where you came last.
Right.
And that's okay.
Yes.
And that's a learning lesson. And that made me stronger. And I think that just through the ups and downs of being in sport and being ranked and having those huge ego hits and having that also rock my world in a really hard way helped me to become a more resilient person over those years. And I always had this big desire to do something different with my life. And I think that moment felt like this golden opportunity. And I always say, like, not everyone's going to, I got a crazy opportunity. Your opportunity isn't going to look like mine, but we all have opportunities in life. I think so often people, especially women, we count ourselves out from those opportunities because we don't think we're good enough. We don't think we're worthy enough. We don't think we're smart enough. We don't think that we're capable enough. And like, how dare we do that to ourselves? Like, we can change the world as women. We need to believe ourselves there. We need to find that courage inside of us. And that's one of the so many reasons why I choose to share this story, because I was never the girl that was meant to be the Olympics. We see Michael Phelps, we see Usain Bolt. They were always talented, and that's amazing, right? But there is also a story like mine where I never believed it and then it happened. So who are you to not believe in yourself?
Yeah.
That happened for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think especially as women, I think the world is sort of set up to tell us no in many ways. And again, we're both in the Western world. We have a lot of privilege. And even with that, we're sort of told no and to stay sort of in a box and to follow certain rules. And women are so powerful. I love what you're saying about, believing in yourself. And I always say this to my kids, it's someone has to do it. Why shouldn't it be you? And something you said about the participation awards, I coach girls soccer. So I coached 10 and 11-year-old girls this year. And this was the first year that only the top 2 teams got trophies. And we were terrible. We were really bad this year, but we came in last place. The team that we started at the beginning of the season and the team we were at the end of the season was light years away from each other. The girls just did an incredible job. And they were so upset about not getting a trophy. And I said, hey, no way. Look at where we were at the beginning of the year and look at where we are now. And if you really want that trophy, work for it in the off season, and not every season's going to be your season because, they switch them up every year. So there's so many valuable lessons, I think, especially for women in sports and what they can learn and that resilience. And I'm right there with you. So you had this incredible opportunity. You decided, I'm going for it. You're at this inflection point. You're going to go for it. Did you have to drop out of college at this point? Were your parents what was your parents' reaction to this?
Yeah. So I went and I told my parents, and I'm very lucky. My parents are beautiful human beings. They've always wanted to cheer me on. But my parents were also Aussie, and in Australia, there's a really common thing called tall poppy syndrome. Have you heard of tall poppy syndrome?
No.
So it's very common that if you are too big or too loud or too shiny, they want to cut you down. Mm-hmm. And so it's a challenge for a lot of people in Australia because it's like, as soon as you think that you're too full of yourself, you kind of want to cut you down. And so as much as my parents were like, this is awesome, they also, I think as natural as a parent was, they're afraid of me failing. And they were also like, are you a lunatic? What are you doing? Did you hit your head again?
Right.
The good thing is I was at an age, I was 21 years old. I'm a full grown adult. I am autonomous. And I said to them, I was like, I'm doing this whether you support me or not.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it. And so they're kind of like, okay, sure. And I am really grateful for my stubbornness because once I decided that, no one was going to tell me no. Mm-hmm. And because I was so afraid of regret and I was so afraid of wondering what if. And so what that actually ended up looking like, because I had a concussion, I had to recover, is, I was also in a depressed state where I didn't have a reason for continuing on. Mm-hmm. This thing gave me that reason. So all of a sudden, my drive to heal my concussion, just 100x. I was reaching out to occupational therapists. I was starting to do meditation. I was doing all of these things that were helping my brain heal. Therefore, it heals faster because I had a reason. I then had to fly to, about 2 months after I got this opportunity, I had to fly to Perth, Australia, where I had never been before. I had to go to my first training camp. And this was kind of the first round of getting on the team. And I remember I went to the training camp. There were 16 girls. I was one of 16 and I sucked. I was not good by any means. I always say that so candidly because it's not like I just made the decision and galloped in. There were so many hurdles to me getting there. But I realized I'm not the best, but I know that I can improve. Yeah. I know that I can use this mind, right? Hard work and having a good mindset and having a good work ethic and choosing to believe in yourself is the most valuable thing you can have in life, much less in sport as well. And so I was like, that's all I got. I may not be the most talented person, but I'm going to work hard and I'm going to work on this, my mind. And so that's what I did. I had to actually fly back after that training camp. I went through this whole process of having to drop out of university and then physically within the next few months moved to Australia. I packed up 2 suitcases. I got a one-way flight across the world. I remember the first day I arrived in Perth, I didn't know anyone. I knew my few teammates that I had started to work with. I took the train to get to my house. I had a sleeping bag. I slept on the floor. I got a phone plan. I got a bank account and I was like, okay, here we go. I didn't have a car. I had to bike to training. I had to walk there sometimes. There were so many things I had to overcome. But one of the things, I think sometimes people get paralyzed in the process too. Mm-hmm. It's I want to do this thing, but I don't know where to start. The thing is, if you just take one step, then you're going to know the next. I didn't know the whole process at the beginning. All that I knew was okay, the next thing is I have to go to this training camp and see. And then from there, I'm going to get the next step. And I didn't know the whole 26-part plan. I just knew that I had to keep figuring out what the next step was. And that was such a helpful thing too, because I think sometimes we want to control the whole process and you can't. You kind of have to surrender to it and figure it out as you go along.
Yeah. When you said that you were working on your mind and your mindset, was this something that you had previously experienced or your coaches were helping you or you were doing research on your own? How did you train your mind and really control those thoughts so that you're moving forward?
Yeah. So, over the years, we'd always have 1 or 2 sessions like where sports psychologists would come in maybe once a year, right? And they talk to us about the power of our mind. And I started to kind of like, okay, this has something to do with it. And the beautiful thing too about my concussion is I started to get into meditation, which I never thought I had the time for before. But if you're concussed, you got nothing else to do, right? So I started to kind of like, the cogs were turning, oh, my mind is powerful. And I was, 21 at the time. A lot of my teammates, I was actually one of the older ones. A lot of my teammates were 16, 17, 18. So I just had a little bit more life experience to realize that there was something more that I could do other than just the work, but the work was also important. And then another big part of that was I was journaling all the time. And I was really working on my self-awareness. One of the things, I think in life, if you're a growth-oriented person like that's listening to a podcast, we observe people, right? We just naturally do that. You'll see people at your work, you'll see people on teams, and you see the people that end up succeeding and you see the people that end up consistently struggling. And what I was noticing is that the athletes that lacked self-awareness were the ones that ended up not doing good in the long term. So self-awareness looks like being able to ask yourself hard questions and give yourself hard answers. And it means that sometimes you fail and sometimes you suck that day and sometimes you weren't your best. But self-awareness is also, okay, tomorrow I will do better. And so my whole journaling process was, what did I do well today? What can I improve? And asking myself those questions every day over the course of months and then years, I started to improve. I went from the bottom of the team to when I tried out and made the Olympic team, I was fourth, wow, which is absolutely mind-blowing, given like my natural skill and ability isn't there. But this was like willing to be as sharpened as it possibly could.
Right. That's incredible. And your friend, I think what you said is your friend said that Australia was rebuilding its team to actually make it to the Olympics. How was that process? I mean, that must have been incredible to not only represent a country. I mean, that's incredible, but also get to the point where they were rebuilding a team to make it to the Olympics. How did it feel to qualify for Rio? And then what was your experience when you were there?
Yeah. So when we started kind of our process in the Olympic world, the sporting world, in every sport that's in Olympics, they talk about cycles, and the cycles are all usually in tune with the Olympics. So it's 4-year cycles. So we were starting a new cycle. There was one girl from the London Olympic team that continued on. She ended up being our captain, and she was an incredible captain. She was the youngest of the past team, and so then became the oldest. So in sports, people get older and they retire. And so the good thing is we kind of had this fresh start. And then the hard thing was a lot of our team was actually quite young. I was the second oldest on the team at 21. And 21 is not that old in hindsight, right? But it was a benefit for me because I think a little bit of my wisdom helped me with my personal growth that I think some of the girls that were 16, 17 learned in the coming years, as you naturally do as a human being. But then the process of like ending up making the team, there's a lot of trial processes when you're an athlete. What people don't realize, if you qualify your country for an Olympics, you don't actually qualify yourself. And so say Team USA can qualify for the Olympics. The people that make it on, say the soccer team, still have to individually qualify. Wow. And so that was a really interesting process because I was on the team that qualified for the Olympics at World Championships. However, then I had to compete against my teammates to make the team. Wow. And so all of a sudden, my teammates become my competitors. And that was really a moment as well when I realized I can't train more than they train. We're all training the same. Also, synchronized swimmers, I believe, are some of the hardest workers out there. We train 6 hours a day in the water, sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours on land, often 5 to 6 days a week. That's more than most sports ever do. And so you really can't train more, because you end up getting worse if you're tiring yourself out that much. So again, I was like, okay, well, I can work on my mind. That's what I can do that maybe they're not doing. And what that looked like at that time too is how can I find the things that I'm really good at, turn up the shine on those, also look at my weaknesses and turn up the dial on those as well. I think sometimes people do either one or the other. They just focus on their good things, not their weaknesses, or they just beat themselves up about their weaknesses and they don't focus on their strengths. And so that kind of aspect, as well as learning from the people that walked before me, I was taking in all of the information from any athletes, any mentors, any sports psychologists. They had a piece of advice, I was learning from them, right? I'm not the first person in the world that's been to the Olympics. People have done it before. I needed to learn from them. And the cool thing about the world that we live in now is like are at such an accelerated pace of learning because of our access to it, right? 50 years ago, you had to go to a library or find a mentor to learn from them. Now we have like millions of podcasts to listen to, and people are giving out information all the time. And so that capacity to be like, okay, I'm going to take as much advice from people that they can give me was one of the reasons that like helped me improve so much and end up making the team.
That's amazing. And what was that like being in Rio? And did you walk in for Australia? Like what was that like?
Yeah, it was such a crazy, surreal thing because, you know, when you make the Olympics, we were leaving Australia. We were wearing our Olympic gear. Everyone's like taking pictures with us. You feel like celebrities. Yeah. And then you get to the Olympic Village and you're not, you know, in Australia at the time, there's 422 Olympians in 25 million people that are in Australia. You get to the Olympic Village, you're like 1 in 10,000 Olympians. And you all of a sudden feel very unimportant because you're just amongst a field of greatness, basically, right? And so that was really bizarre. It was a bizarre world to be at the Olympics where you see all of these nations together and all of these, so many like famous people and celebrities everywhere. And so you have to live in this weird world of like normal things that you realize aren't normal, but you have to normalize it in your nervous system. I realized this early on. If I'm freaking out because this is the coolest thing I've ever experienced every day, I'm not focused on my sport. Right. I'm not like in the right headspace. And so I had to really be zoned in and let myself be like, oh yeah, it's totally normal that I just met the king and queen of Denmark. Like it's totally normal that I just met the prime minister, like those things, and just making those things normal. But then we were lucky enough that when you compete at the end of the Olympics, which we did, the end of the 2 weeks, you can walk in the opening ceremonies. Often athletes that competed the first few days aren't allowed to walk in the opening ceremonies, but we got to walk in the opening ceremonies. And also the cool thing about being Australia is it goes in alphabetical order. So therefore we are kind of at the beginning. And so I'm going to get on TV. I'm going to get on TV. People are going to see me. And I had written on my hand, "Hi, Mom and Dad" in Sharpie. And, you know, I was planning, I was like, we're going to be on the outer right-hand side because usually the cameras follow them all the way around. And so me and my teammates were like moving over to the right-hand side. And when you were going into the opening ceremony, the whole event is already happening, right? So you can hear the music, you can hear it all happening. The energy is just like vibrating. There's like, you know, almost 100,000 people in the stadium. Like it is insane energy. And you have to walk through this dark tunnel to get into the stadium. And so we're shuffling along. We push ourselves up to the front, the flag bearers in front of us. We start to walk through this dark tunnel. And you can see the light of the stadium at the end of the other side. And we're walking really slow in there. And I ended up having this moment as well when I was in that tunnel where the whole Aussie team started chanting, "Aussie, Aussie, Aussie, oi, 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 Aussie, oi." And I started chanting with them and it's just on and on and on we were going. And I started crying because it also felt like this incredible like metaphor of my journey. Like I was walking through the darkness to get to the light at the other side. And it was so hard, everything that I walked through. Yeah. But I was going to get there. And so, you know, I was chanting and I was crying with my teammates. I was holding her hand and I walked into the light of the stadium. And in that moment, I felt like I had became an Olympian and I was standing on the side and me and my teammates are like holding hands and I'm crying. And on the front page of Across the Newspaper of Australia the next day is like me and my teammate. And I'm like, I have this really funny picture of me bawling my eyes out because my whole life I've been kind of an Olympic fan. I've watched opening ceremonies for years. Yeah. I never thought I would be in one. Right. And then I was. And I had this moment of like, pinch me. How did this happen? I know how it happened because I know I worked for it, but how the heck did this happen? Right. And I just really allowed myself to be present and take it in and really feel grateful as well.
That's amazing. Oh, I got chills hearing you talk about it. That's amazing. And so you competed at the Olympics. Then what?
Yeah, good question. I was wondering that too at the time. I kind of had this like end date in mind. I think sometimes if we're working towards a goal, sometimes we don't see past the goal, which
right.
in one way can be a great thing because we're focused, and another way can not be good because life continues to move on. And so I competed on August 18th and 19th, and then August 20th came, and I was like, what do I do now?
Right, right.
What am I going to do with my life? What's going to happen? And also keep in mind, we weren't paid athletes.
Right.
I came back from the Olympics and I was totally broke. I didn't have a job. I didn't have money. My partner at the time was supporting me. I was living with him in Australia and I had nothing. I was an Olympian, but I had nothing else to my name. And so it was really humbling. And it was such a high that I think that there's a natural dip. And I kind of knew that was coming, but of course it's a hard reality to face. And in that moment, I really had to grapple with what do I want to continue to do? And at that point, I didn't feel ready to leave. I just never knew what life would look like on the other side. But I'm so proud to say I continued to swim for another 2 years. I went to 2 more World Championships. And in 2019, when I retired, I got to be Australia's first mixed duet. So I competed with my male duet partner and we got to make history in Australia. And that gave me a bit of time to figure out what's on the other side of that. And it gave me a few years to, feel like I got the most out of my experience and really got to be proud to represent Australia and figure out what was next.
Yeah.
And which has led me to now.
Were there any unique opportunities that opened up because you were an Olympic athlete?
I'm married. I just got married a few months ago, and me and my husband laugh because if I ever want a door opened, I just casually say that I'm an Olympian. And now people I get on podcasts, I get rental applications,
right.
Things just open. So that's kind of a fun benefit that has happened. Access to the other people that you meet, getting to meet other Olympians, other world champions, other people that have done incredible things has been one of the greatest honors. And as well, getting to meet Paralympians, if you want to ever be inspired, go watch the Paralympics. Not only are those guys incredible athletes, but they have really overcome something, and they all have a story. And so that was such an honor to meet those people. And then I started to get the opportunity to share my story. I'd speak in schools and at workplaces and get to inspire kids. And it felt like such a full circle moment because I had people that had come to my school when I was little and inspired me, and I got to be one of those people. And so that was a really cool thing. And the aftermath of the Olympics, and even still to this day, just the opportunity to share my story, but most importantly, the messages that align with it is so fulfilling. It's one of the most fulfilling things.
You're talking about this mindset and resilience and how it got you to the Olympics, which is incredible. How did you use that as you were transitioning out of being a full-time athlete? And were there new things that you had to learn as you were approaching life in this sort of different way?
Yeah. So, I had this desire. I was on the way to trying out for the 2020 Olympic team. And then I had this kind of reckoning where I was like, I need to do something for others. Being an athlete is amazing, but it's also very selfish because you just have to focus on yourself. And I realized I wanted to contribute. I wanted to do something for other people. And I wanted to share my story more and help other women. And so that led to, trying to figure out how to do that. And I didn't know. I knew what I wanted to feel like. I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but I had, again, no idea how. I was just I'm just going to take one step and then I'm going to take the next step. And that ended up to me writing my book and then leading to the work that I do now. But what helped me was the mindset of, okay, I'm just going to go into this full force because I don't want to live with regret. The mindset of, I'm going to continue to be self-aware. I'm going to continue to always grow. I'm going to continue to learn from other people. The persistence of what it takes to be an athlete, right? Persistence is when commitment meets adversity. You think that you are committed and then wait till you hit a hurdle. Then you're really committed. And that's when you have to find that persistence because life has a million hurdles. That's just life. And it's not personal. That's one of the many things I learned being an athlete. We used to go to competitions around the world and our sports psych would say to us, he's like, it will never go to plan. He goes, you will have a perfect plan and it will never work out. Someone will be late, someone will be sick, the bus won't show up, the pool will be like, the food will be bad, right. Something will always go wrong. And at first I was like, well, don't put that out there into the world. Like things won't, but he's right. And it's not because it's personal. It's just because that's what happens in life. Nothing goes perfectly to plan. And there are just hard things. And so the capacity to deal with adversity as it was coming and just roll with the punches and be like, water off a duck's back, it's nothing, I got this. Because the people that end up succeeding aren't the ones that have the perfect plan. People that end up succeeding are the ones that the plan has totally been ambushed, because that's what happens in life, and you still go after it and you still like work towards it and you still figure it out. And all those concepts have helped me in the work that I do now, because that's just like a metaphor for what happens in life, right?
Yeah.
And so those pieces have been what I've transferred over.
And, that's a great transition into what you're doing now. I was on your Instagram and you had a quote on there that what you think is the end is really the beginning. And I got chills reading it. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing now and how you are living your best life?
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to help other people, and I didn't know how to do that. I first really wanted to write a book. I wanted to write my story down, and I figured out how to do that and get it out there to the world. And I wanted to do more speaking. But I transitioned into all of this at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. We all know what happened in 2020. There's no speaking opportunities in 2020. And so it forced me to be more online, which was a blessing in disguise, because I also realized that like, if I want to share this story and be relatable, I have to understand what women are going through. Yeah. I have to see what the challenges they're facing, because I had many challenges in my experience, but it's still a niche experience. I need to understand what women are being faced with that's stopping them from going after their dreams, working on themselves, loving themselves, believing in themselves. And so that led me into this like natural transition into like, life coaching, working on women's self-worth and their mindset, realizing that I was such a natural at it too. I not only had been kind of like the friend that always gives advice growing up, but also I was a synchronized swimming coach alongside swimming for many years. And one of the pieces that I loved the most about it was like cheerleading them, believing in them, like inspiring them, getting them to overcome hard things. And so that moved into this work that I do now, where I coach clients one-on-one. I run retreats with my husband. I run programs all around different aspects of mindset, self-worth, self-belief, and empowerment, because I am grateful that one of the gifts of synchronized swimming is it is a female-dominated sport, which is very rare in this world. And in that, I was shown how badass women are. Yeah. Like the fact that we're the ones that are trailblazing the way in this sport, and now men are just starting to get into it, which is also important for equality. Mm-hmm. But like I was around strong women, throughout my swimming career, and I'm so proud of that. And then realizing too that strong women change the world, empower women change the world. But a lot of us are not empowered because we don't think we're the right size. We had something that happened in our childhood that's beating us up. We don't believe in ourselves. We've been around critical people. We're in environments that aren't supportive. We have stuck to this belief that we're not good enough. We're not worthy enough. And that was very much my narrative as well as a child and growing up, just because that's something I had to overcome and learn as a human being. And women can't change the world if they're beating themselves up in their head. Yep. So we need to work on that, so then they can go do their thing in their mastery, so they can go be on the UN, become politicians, do their art, create their business, whatever it is. And so that's really what's inspired me to do this work now.
That's amazing. Yeah, the amount of time that I think we as women worry about what we look like, or, are we conforming to whatever society is saying, or, relationships are important. Romantic relationships, I should say, they're not everything. And I think about that so often, about how much time and energy women are spending on that versus themselves and putting themselves out into the world and giving of themselves to the world and sharing their gifts and talents. I love what you're saying. What would you say?
We have to have an audit of like, what is consuming our mind?
Yes.
And for me, for many years, what was consuming my mind was myself and my self-criticism. Mm-hmm. But what I realized is when I started to heal that through the work that I do, is what's consuming my mind is how can I give? How can I help others? How can I contribute? What ideas can I give to this world? And that is much more of a benefit to the world than my own self-criticism. Yeah. And so we need to like make sure that we shift that percentage. There's always going to be a little bit of healthy self-doubt, right? But we want to shift that percentage so we have more women that are thinking about how we can help others, what we can do in this world, how we can inspire others, how can we do better at our jobs or whatever it may be for us. So we change that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you find in working with women? What do you find are the most common challenges that they're coming to you with?
The women that I see is often they are too consumed in their body not looking the way that they think that it should look based on some narrative that we have created in media and social media, and them not feeling worthy that they can actually have the job that pays them well, or the partner that actually values them, or the friendships that treat them well, or they don't feel enough, or they don't feel valued or capable. And because of this like core wound or core wounded belief that they are not enough, they're not worthy, they're not capable, they're not valued, they're not loved, they stop themselves from going after and getting the things that in their heart they want. Right? In their heart, they want to have the beautiful relationship or have the career or create the business. But there's something in them. There's a little voice in their head that goes, you're not enough. How dare you think that? Who do you think that you are for doing that? And it could be our voice. It could be the voice of someone in our past. It could be the voice of our trauma. And it stops us from doing those things. And so that's often what I see with women that I work with.
What advice, if there's someone listening today and is like, I love this, I'm inspired by this, but I don't know how to start. What would you say? I love what you said about like, you don't have to have the entire journey mapped out, but you just have to have the next step. What would you say would be the most useful next step for someone who's just starting on this journey?
That's such a good question. This is what helps me, but this might not be for everyone. And so with every piece of advice you get on the internet, like take what feels good for you and leave the rest. Get a journal and start writing down how you feel, and just start doing a like mental check of like, where am I right now? One of the things that I do with my clients when I run group programs is I go, give me one word of how you feel today. And it's such a simple but powerful question, because sometimes we're so busy in our life that we're like, how do I actually feel today? I don't know. Do I feel anxious? Do I feel excited? Do I feel stressed? Do I feel overwhelmed? Do I feel on top of the world? And so that starts to build the muscle of self-awareness. And then going throughout your day, the little journal prompts of what did I do well today? What do I want to improve on? And the reason why I say, what did I do well? What do I want to improve on? Too often we as women go, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should do more of this. I sucked at this. I'm bad at this. No. It's not that. Let's delete that language from our reality. It's, I want to improve. Right. And that comes naturally from the fact that we can all improve as human beings. No one's perfect. I don't want to be perfect. It's boring. Right. But it's not coming from a self-critical lens, which I think too many of us come from. And so if you could just every couple days or every day, if you're really committed, just start to like take a mental check-in of how do I feel? What did I do well? What do I want to improve? You're going to start to see changes in your life in whatever it is. And then follow whatever the next step is that shows up, whether it be another podcast or a meditation or a person or a book. Like life will show you what you need next if you're paying attention.
Oh, I love that. So I ask everyone 3 questions, and I normally ask this question last, but I'm going to start with it. How can people find you? And can you talk a little bit more in depth about the type of coaching work and retreat work that you do? So if someone's listening and is like, I love this, I am totally on Team Danielle, I want to go forward with this. Can you give a little flavor of what that looks like?
Yeah. So my big place that I'm on is on Instagram. I also am on TikTok. On both of them, you can find me, the Danielle Reedy, Reedy. I got married 6 months ago, so I'm in the fun process of changing my name over, which is very complicated when you have a personal brand. So if you see Danielle Kettlewell, that's also me. I run throughout the year. I also have a podcast called the Beautiful Souls Podcast, which is a great place to start and have a listen. But I run programs and free workshops and paid workshops and retreats throughout the year all around mindset, self-worth, empowerment, self-belief, changing our beliefs, and really creating our dreams, which doesn't come without challenge, but we can absolutely create them. And so I share a lot of that on social media. I have a program coming up called Reclamation. It's all around feminine empowerment. And really healing the things that don't serve us to become the empowered woman that we all deserve to be. That's been one of my signature programs that has helped women like just transform their lives. And then also me and my husband run retreats in Bali. We used to live in Bali for a while. For women around women's empowerment. My husband has a beautiful story in of itself. He saw women oppressed by the hands of men for many, many years. And so he is in a totally different realm, but for the same mission of like seeing women be empowered, because he wishes his mother had that and his sister had that. And so he has such an authentic and beautiful like life and perspective and story that's led him to where he is. And it's kind of worked together in my journey in a special way that has led to our really beautiful retreat that we run.
That's wonderful. Well, I'm so glad the two of you found each other. That's amazing.
Me too.
So what do you love most about what you're doing now?
I think the best feeling in the world is helping someone, like holistically helping someone, whether that be through a conversation or through working with someone or through inspiring them. I have had people over the past 5 years that have told me I have changed their life or saved their life. And again, it's not me, because that's giving me their power, but being a guide to helping them do that is like the greatest gift in the world. You know, I can die happy in many, many years knowing that I've helped somebody. And I think that at the core, human beings are good. You ask most people if they had a dream and they could do anything, it's some level of contribution. Well, it's going to look different than mine looks, but it's some level of contribution in helping the world. Because our deepest fulfillment comes from, yes, we need to fill our own cup. And yes, we don't want to be a martyr, but giving to other people is like the best feeling you could ever have. Yeah. And that's what I love about the work that I do.
It's amazing. And then what advice would you give to your younger self?
A couple years ago, I don't know if it was in a dream or in a meditation, I had this saying come to me, because me, as well as every person listening to this, has had down moments. We've had, the drop to our knee moments, right? We've had the crying on the bathroom floor moments. And what came to me in, just reflecting on those hard moments that I've had in my life is kind of whispering in her ear and saying to her, if she only knew what was coming, she would have believed a little bit more. She wouldn't have been so afraid. She would have trusted a bit more. But I don't want to tell her, because the mystery of it is magical. But if only she knew. And I think that growth-oriented humans that are listening to this podcast, there's beautiful things coming in your life. And if you're in a challenging moment, know that it's going to get better. And it's a really cool statement, whether you're in that moment now or you've been in the past, being like, if only you knew what was coming in the best way possible. Yeah. It's a really beautiful way to look forward.
That's beautiful. And that's a really great place for us to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining today and for sharing your experience, and your energy and enthusiasm and advice is palpable. And it's incredible that you went from concussion to Olympian to now empowering women all over the world. It's an amazing story, and you're just getting started, which is even better. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Megan.
Thanks for listening to Wait, What Do You Do Again? For more information about today's guest, or if you'd like to be on the show, please visit megdeford.com. See you next time.